What's going on, guys? I want to talk about calories in, calories out, and how it pertains to weight loss, weight gain, or weight maintenance. More specifically, fat loss and muscle gain. Now, calories in, calories out is going to be the overriding variable that determines whether or not weight loss or weight gain occurs. However, in my opinion, this is a drastic oversimplification. And for most people, the vast majority of people, this is just not a useful lens to look at nutrition and training through. Now, too many people kind of just brush this off. They say, oh, you want to lose weight? It's calories in, calories out, get into a calorie deficit. Oh, you want to gain weight? It's calories in, calories out, get into a calorie surplus. And again, this is technically true, but it's an oversimplification that I just don't think it's useful. And for most people, it's going to take them down the wrong path. To me, calories in, calories out is sort of like saying, asking, how does a computer work? Well, it's just electrical signal in, electrical signal out. Is that true? Yes. But obviously, that's an oversimplification of how a computer works. There is a very complex system going on within the computer, right? That occurs between that electrical input and that electrical output. And that's same with calories in, calories out. There's a very complex system that is occurring internally within the body between the point where the calories go in and the calories go out. Now, I think it's important to point out that a calorie, it's not really a unit of nutrition. A calorie is actually a unit of physics, right? 1 calorie is the unit of heat energy required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. Now, we can relatively accurately track calorie intake, right? There's a whole system by which, foods are prescribed calorie amounts, right? And it's somewhat inaccurate, give or take 5, 10% maybe. But for the most part, we can do a pretty decent job of calculating calories in. However, calories out is very difficult and very inaccurate to track, right? You can't just simply throw on a watch or some sort of app on your phone that's just going to measure step count and activity. It's not as simple as just plugging in what exercise you did for the day and spitting out some calculation of how many calories you actually burned, right? You ever get on the treadmill or the bike at the gym and it shows there's a little number on the screen. How many calories have you burned? Well, that's going to be very different for everyone, right? It's going to be based upon how big is the individual. And not just that, what is the metabolism of the individual, right? A 200-pound man, just, a very lean body composition, lots of muscle mass, low body fat, is going to burn a lot more calories compared to a 200-pound man who is primarily body fat with very little lean mass, right? And then metabolism, there's so many variables that are going to affect calories out. And it's just not a metric that we can really accurately track. So that's one thing that's already working against us. But let's focus on the calories in part, because a calorie is not just simply a calorie, right? The food selection, the macro breakdown of those calories in is going to change the outcome. And just any argument that it's not is just not a useful, smart, real world argument. Let's just give some simple examples here, right? If I feed you 1,000 calories of protein versus 1,000 calories of carbohydrates versus 1,000 calories of dietary fat, the outcome is going to be different. The way it affects your body is going to be different. I mean, looking at protein has what we call a very high thermic effect of food, meaning your body just has to burn a lot of calories literally by just processing, digesting, and metabolizing protein. Protein is very, very difficult to be converted into body fat and stored as body fat, right? The body just has a very difficult time physiologically doing that. So it's very hard to overeat protein in the sense that you're going to eat too much protein and then gain body fat. Well, that's not true of dietary fat. Okay, dietary fat, physiologically speaking, has a very easy time being stored as body fat. compared to protein. So 1,000 calories of protein in versus 1,000 calories of fat in, going to be very different. And then you look at carbohydrates, kind of in the middle there, where it's going to have a much harder time being converted and stored as body fat compared to dietary fat. Not quite as difficult a time as protein, but then carbohydrates are going to be an energy source, right? They can be stored as glycogen. So when you consume 1,000 calories of carbohydrates versus fat, well, knowing that carbs are going to be the preferential fuel source, knowing that they can be stored as potential energy, as glycogen in the muscle, the fate of those 1,000 calories of carbohydrates has the potential to be very different than the fate of those 1,000 grams of fat once you eat them. And that's not even looking at the specific foods. I mean, a carbohydrate's not simply going to be a carbohydrate. I mean, if I feed you 1,000 calories worth of just, table sugar versus 1,000 calories worth of white rice, well, in the real world, this is going to play out very differently. Okay, this is going to play out very differently in terms of how it affects your blood sugar, how it affects your digestion, how it affects the way you feel, how it affects your output, right? You're not going to go fuel up for the gym by eating 1,000 calories worth of table sugar, right? Well, if you're fueled up on 1,000 calories worth of white rice, you're going to feel a whole lot different in the gym, which is going to drastically affect the calorie output. And I mean, that's just one example. I mean, if I feed you 1,000 calories worth of a protein source, well, if it's whey isolate, this is going to be incredibly quickly digesting. And a lot of it's probably going to be converted into glucose via gluconeogenesis versus if I feed you 1,000 calories worth of chicken breast, well, this is going to digest much slower. Okay. It's going to affect your blood serum amino acid levels at a very different rate. It's going to spike insulin in a very different manner. It's going to affect your digestion in a different manner. Okay, it's going to be very different in terms of satiation and how it affects your appetite and just how it affects the way you feel, right? And then, the calories in and the calories out. Well, that's going to play out differently based on the size and body composition of the individual. For example, let's say you fed me 100 grams of carbs, and then you fed your average male 100 grams of carbs, and then we each walked a mile, right? The calories out would be drastically different. The way that those 100 grams of carbs affected our energy for that mile walk would be very differently. Okay. I'm a 6'7", 320-pound male. I'm very lean. I carry a lot of muscle mass, not a ton of body fat. So the metabolic process, consuming those carbs and then walking that mile is going to be very differently. My calories out is going to be drastically higher than the, average person walking that mile. But then let's make it a little bit more interesting. Let's say we give those 100 grams of carbs to me, and then you give 100 grams of carbs to another 6'7", 320-pound individual. But let's say that individual has a much different body composition than me. Let's say they have a much higher body fat percentage. They're carrying a lot less lean mass. Well, the way that their body is going to process those carbohydrates is going to be drastically different than me. Okay. The way that our body is using those carbs as a fuel source is going to be very different. And again, the calorie output walking that mile is going to be very different. So you have two identically sized individuals, feeding them identical food, having them do the identical level of exercise, and you are going to get two very different outcomes. Okay. And that's just a little micro example. But this is just highlighting the fact that the calories in, calories out thing is an oversimplification, right? If the hypothetical 6'7", 320-pound male counterpart to me in this hypothetical situation was purely trying to evaluate their nutrition, their training, their weight loss journey or weight gain journey based on calories in, calories out. Well, if they were trying to simply calculate the 100 grams of carbs in and the exercise output, the step count of walking that mile, and just trying to put it on the same playing field as me, it's not going to work, right? That's not the accurate lens to track things through. And then we got to get into just some more of the internal processes that are occurring that go beyond just simply size and body composition. Well, insulin sensitivity is going to be a major factor here. So, insulin sensitivity, kind of in layman's terms, is just how effective is your body at utilizing carbohydrates as a fuel source? How effective is your body at storing carbohydrates as glycogen versus eating a bunch of carbohydrates? Your blood sugar levels rise, your body releases insulin, your body is resistant to insulin, so it doesn't do a very good job of shuttling those carbs into muscle tissue. You just sit there with that high blood sugar level, and then eventually those carbs or those the glucose in your blood gets converted and stored as body fat. This is going to play out very differently in individuals based on their insulin sensitivity. And a lot of that is going to have to do with, lean body mass versus fat mass. Um, but people are going to have different levels of insulin sensitivity for a number of different factors. Okay, you can have a bodybuilder who's got tons of muscle mass, is very lean, but they may have built up an insulin resistance by just improperly eating way too many carbs, too many sugars over the course of time. Maybe their sleep is really bad. That's going to negatively impact insulin sensitivity. Maybe someone is a type 1 diabetic, right? There are so many different variables that are going to affect insulin sensitivity. And then you feed someone who's very insulin resistant versus someone who's very insulin sensitive an equal amount of carbohydrates. Well, that is going to play out very, very different internally for these two individuals. One of them is going to have a much greater chance of storing those calories, those carbs, as body fat. The other is going to have a much higher chance of using those carbs as a fuel source. So again, calories in, calories out, oversimplification here. And again, getting back to kind of specific foods. Well, different foods are going to affect digestion very differently. Okay. We could look at something like, 500 calories of Pop Tarts versus 500 calories of potatoes versus 500 calories of white rice. All three of these foods are going to digest very differently. Like, let's look at the potato, for example. Now, this would be considered, generically speaking, like, oh, a good clean food, a non processed, single ingredient, low fat food. Well, potatoes are going to digest very slowly. They're a very starchy carb. So if I'm about to go to the gym and I eat 100 grams of carbs worth of potatoes, that's going to be sitting very heavy on my stomach. I'm probably going to be bloated when I go into the gym. You think that might affect my calorie output in the gym if I'm training with a bloated stomach full of potatoes that haven't nearly fully digested, that hasn't nearly gotten into the bloodstream? Okay, that is going to affect a number of different things. So again, not just as simple as, oh, eat 100 grams of carbs, 400 calories going into the gym, and then track your output. Simple as that. No, of course not. The rate of digestion is going to affect all these things, and everyone's going to digest food differently. Some people can eat potatoes, they have no issue, no bloating, they digest it easily. Other people are going to have a somewhat of a significant intolerance to potatoes, like me. I can't eat a ton of potatoes. I get bloated. It just does not digest well for me. And then we could look at something like a gluten intolerance, right? You feed someone with celiacs, 200 calories worth of pasta versus someone who has no issues with gluten. You feed them 200 calories worth of pasta. You don't think that's going to affect things differently? You don't think that is going to affect the outcome drastically differently? It is. The person with the gluten intolerance consuming X number of calories of food containing gluten, now that's causing inflammation in the body. Okay, now they're feeling awful. That is going to play out in the end result significantly. Again, another example of how this goes well beyond calories in, calories out. Other things that are going to affect overall outcomes are going to be electrolyte intake, hydration status, micronutrient intake. So, if you're eating 2,000 calories worth of fast food versus eating 2,000 calories of a very nutrient diverse, micronutrient rich foods, that is going to play out extremely differently in the end result. Again, the computer example, electrical signal in, electrical signal out. There's this whole complicated process going on internally. Same thing with our body. Okay. Your hydration status, your electrolyte status is going to affect everything at the cellular level. If you are dehydrated, if your electrolyte intake is poor, your ability to burn body fat, your ability to build muscle tissue, your ability to have ideal outputs in training, your recovery status from that training is going to be extremely diminished compared to the person who maybe is eating identical calories to you, but they're properly hydrated. Their potassium intake's dialed in, their sodium intake's dialed in, their magnesium intake is dialed in, right? They're eating micronutrient rich food, so they're not deficient in any vitamins or minerals. Okay. Vitamin and mineral deficiencies are going to play out in blood sugar. It's going to play out in recovery. It's going to play out in sleep. All of these different systems are going to affect fat loss, muscle gain, recovery, performance. Okay. Again, vastly more complicated than calories in, calories out. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on electrolyte intake alone. Okay, but that just some additional examples there of what makes things more complex. There's been some studies out there where it's like, like a Twinkie example where a guy, ate a Twinkie diet or a McDonald's diet, whatever, and just simply controlled calories and lost weight. And that kind of muddies the waters and it kind of reinforces that whole, oh, it's just calories in, calories out. And yeah, in the short term, if you are just in a huge calorie deficit, regardless of the foods you're eating, yeah, technically you'll probably lose weight. But is that going to be body fat? Is that sustainable? Is that going to play out in a good long term result? Hell no. Okay. So again, calories in, calories out. True. Yes. Is it the proper lens to look at things through? No. And then we can get into the blood work, right? What is your thyroid output, right? If I'm feeding 2,000 calories to an individual who has a healthy functioning thyroid versus feeding 2,000 calories to someone who's got a severely deficient thyroid, okay, they are going to burn calories very, very differently. And that's not something you can track. You're not going to be able to accurately track the calorie output. There's no device that is going to track the, thyroid function in conjunction with the exercise, right? I could clone myself. And if we give my clone, a situation where the thyroid output is very low. We give the clone a condition where the thyroid is not functioning very well. It's very down-regulated. And you could feed myself and this thyroid deficient clone the same exact foods, same exact calories, have us do the same exact exercise, and the rate of calorie burning would be drastically different between us. Okay, the healthy thyroid would burn a lot more calories. And again, that's not just some simple math equation that you can track. And there's a number of other hormones and blood work metrics that are going to affect fat loss, muscle gain, your ability to burn calories, all these things, prolactin, estrogen, testosterone, right? Take a 35-year-old male who's got healthy, high levels of testosterone. They're on the upper end of the natural testosterone spectrum. And then take an identically sized male doing the same exact workout, but this particular male has very low levels of testosterone. Have them both eat the same exact diet, doing the same exact exercise routine for 12 weeks. Let's see who looks better at the end of those 12 weeks. If you guess the guy with the high testosterone levels, ding, 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 you got a winner. Okay. And again, that is a variable that had nothing to do with the calories in, calories out. The testosterone levels are going to drastically play out in real world, how that affects muscle gain, body composition, all those different things. And it's going to affect their output in the gym. You don't think the guy with the higher testosterone levels is going to feel better in training, lift more weights, hit more reps, and therefore just burn more calories? Yeah, they are. Okay. So anyway, I just threw a lot at you, kind of muddying the waters here of the whole calories in, calories out thing. And again, I do just want to reiterate that This is not some like denial of the physics that calories in, calories out, it's not a thing. That's not what I'm saying. Okay. Again, like I said at the very beginning, it's true. It's just an oversimplification that doesn't take into account anything that's going on internally. It doesn't take into account the way that different foods are going to play out in a number of different ways. It doesn't take into account the way different macros are going to play out in a number of different ways. It doesn't take into account the way that different types of training is going to play out very differently, right? You have one individual doing heavy resistance training versus another individual who's maybe technically burning the same number of calories doing distance running. That's going to play out very differently in the end results. Okay. The guy resistance training is going to build more muscle. More muscle is going to build a higher metabolism. Higher metabolism is going to burn more calories. More lean mass means that person is going to do a better job utilizing carbohydrates compared to the individual who's doing distance running, maybe burning the same amount of calories via their exercise activity. They're probably going to have significantly less muscle mass, which is going to play out again in the metabolism, the way their body processes food, all those different things. So, what are some practical takeaways? Okay, so if the calories in, calories out thing is just this big, complicated system, it's not the right way to look at things. Well, what should we do then? Well, what I would suggest is tracking your intake, right? Again, we can pretty accurately track calorie intake. Don't try to quantify your calorie output. Again, it's going to be inaccurate. It's not going to work. It's not a valuable metric to track. In terms of your output, I would track things, just not in terms of calories, right? I would track your step count. I would track exactly what you're doing in training in the gym. If you're lifting, I would track exercises that you're doing, the sets, the reps, the weights that you're used. If you're running, track your miles. If you're biking, track your distances. Whatever your form of physical activity is, quantify what you're doing. Okay. So we want to kind of know what we're doing, right? We want to know roughly what does our intake look like. We want to be able to quantify what are we doing in terms of exercise, in terms of movement, in terms of output. That's going to give us a decent framework understanding and just something to track. And down the road, we could potentially manipulate that. But, I put out a video a couple months ago talking about building the metabolism, how the metabolism is often the roadblock to fat loss, right? Our metabolism just being our body's engine, right? We all have our basal metabolic rate, our just resting metabolism. How many calories does your body burn just keeping the lights on, just keeping you alive? And that's going to be different from individual to individual, but it's a quality that you can train. You can improve your metabolism. You can build your metabolism, right? In that building the metabolism video, I used the example of a client I worked with a while back who was a 240-pound male who had a lot of body fat to lose. And he came to me, and his average daily calorie intake was about 1,900 calories, right? Not a lot of food. And he was maintaining 240 pounds and he wanted to lose weight. So he's thinking, okay, I got to go into a calorie deficit here. Well, what I told him was, listen, man, you're not eating enough food to support fat loss. Okay. If we pull out, call it 500 calories, you're going to be at 1,400 calories. That's not a lot of food. That's not enough food to fuel training, to fuel recovery, to fuel muscle retention. Your appetite's going to be crazy. Your energy is going to be low. And then what happens when we plateau? We decrease calories again. We drop you to what, 900 calories? No, we can't do that. We need to build the metabolism. And how do we build the metabolism? Number one, we start training effectively so your body can handle more food. And then we feed you more food. We put more gas in the gas tank and we start driving that car further and faster. So for most people, the vast majority of just kind of gen pop people who ultimately want to improve their physique, most of the time I would have them start eating more food in conjunction with training more effectively. And when it comes to eating more food, I'm not just saying, oh, just start eating a ton of junk, just start slapping on, X number of calories. A simple way to approach this would be eating kill it, pick it, grow it foods. You probably heard me use this term before. And I stole this term from a mentor of mine, Justin Harris. Kill it, pick it, grow it foods, just being foods that if you can hunt it, you can kill it, you can fish it, you can grow it in the ground, you can pick it out of the tree. It's probably a safe bet to include in your diet, right? These are going to be non-processed, single ingredient, whole foods, generally speaking, pretty low fat, right? So you build a diet around kill it, pick it, grow it foods. You don't even have to worry about tracking your calorie intake. Most people just build a diet around those foods. They are instantly going to improve their body composition, assuming that they are also exercising and moving and training alongside that. Now, if we want to put some numbers on things, I think most people getting to about 40 calories per kilogram of body weight is going to be a good calorie intake to get up to where you're maintaining your body weight, right? I use the example of the 240-pound man eating 1,900 calories and how those calories are too low to really go into a fat loss mode here. We would like to get that guy up to maintaining body weight at 40 calories per kilogram. So let's say we're dealing with, an 100, I'm just use simple numbers here, an 100-kilogram male. Okay, 100 kilograms is going to be about 221 pounds. Okay, well, 40 calories per kilogram for that guy is going to be 4,000 calories. So if that 100-kilogram male is maintaining their body weight on about 4,000 calories, that's a great spot. That's a great starting point where you could then try to go into a calorie deficit or go into a calorie surplus from there, right? But for the most part, most people don't really even have to worry about getting into the weeds with the numbers. Okay, most people build a diet around kill it, pick it, grow it foods. Start moving more, start training more effectively. And in and of itself, right then and there, you're going to be in a great spot. You start with that. Okay, get some meal consistency going. Okay, start eating the same number of meals daily around the same time, right? Let's say that's 4 meals a day. Okay, you start eating 4 meals a day built around kill it, pick it, grow it foods. Start building each of those meals around a protein source, a kill it, pick it, grow it protein source. Start moving more. Shoot for 8 to 10,000 steps daily. Get into the gym. Start training, whether it's 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week. Start training and start training with some intensity. Try to train effectively. Get stronger. Track your progress in the gym. Objectively track it and objectively progress in the gym. Okay, you start with that meal consistency, kill it, pick it, grow it foods, getting your step count up, training in the gym, getting stronger, making progress. You haven't even tracked a calorie yet, and you're already making improvement. I promise you. All right, next step, you're getting a little bit more advanced. Let's track our intake a little bit. Let's try to make sure that we're getting up to 40 calories per kilogram of body weight. We're not there yet. We're eating less than that and we're maintaining. Let's try to slowly increase our food intake over the course of time. Kill it, pick it, grow it foods. Probably, you know, gram of protein per pound of body weight. And then adding in more carbohydrates as you go. Kill it, pick it, grow it carbohydrates. Training effectively. You get yourself up to maintaining body weight around 40 calories per kilogram. You want to start tracking a deficit. Okay, drop down to about 35 calories per kilogram body weight. That's going to be a good healthy deficit to drop into. You want to go into a gain phase, bump it up to about 45 calories per kilogram body weight. It's going to be a little bit different for everyone, not overly that simple. Okay, but that's a good starting point. So, again, when it comes to calories in, calories out, not a good place for most people to start. Not a useful lens to look at the world through when it comes to improving your body composition. Is it true? Is it a myth? No, it's not a myth. It is true. But again, it's an oversimplification. So those are my 2 cents on the matter. If you guys have any questions on that, drop them in the comments. As always, I really appreciate the support you guys are giving to the channel. The channel has been growing. It's been a lot of fun, and I just love putting out content. And I'm not trying to be clickbaity. I'm not trying to be polarizing. I'm not trying to just get views for the sake of getting views. I just want to put out quality, reasonable information, right? It would be very easy to drive up engagement and views being controversial and polarizing and being negative, calling people out, things like that. It's not what I want to do. I just want to put out realistic, truthful, reasonable, quality information. And I hope that's what I'm doing. So, guys, if you're enjoying the content, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, like the video. It helps the channel grow in the algorithm, get out to more people. As always, stay tuned for the Hammer and Chisel Performance Podcast. Episodes dropping every Tuesday here on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. If you want to get more of me, go to my website, hammerandchiselperformance.com. You can find my coaching services, ebook, training programs. I just dropped my winter bulk hypertrophy program, which is a 9-week, 4-day split hypertrophy program utilizing weekly undulating periodization, where you're rotating through high reps and low weight, moderate reps and moderate weight, low reps and heavy weight, cycling through that, hitting all the different pathways of hypertrophy. So proud of the program. You guys can find that link in the video description here, or on the link in my bio on Instagram, or on my website. So guys, appreciate you. We'll catch you in the next video.